And if you don't have, thank you. And if you don't have the information for that, just let me know. Either email me, I'll put my email in the chat if you don't know, or just put your name in the chat now and I can get you that information. It will be Hunter Young is one of our EPA remedial project managers who will be at that one. And then we have a new EPA remedial project manager who will be only a week old at that point. And they'll be there too, most likely. So you'll get to meet our new one who's going to be replacing Benjamin Lake. Thank you, Michael. It's from 12 to 1.
Yeah, sure, no worries. I may be jumping the gun on this, but we are talking about possibly wanting to do a maybe a volunteer day, help do some painting in our new office space where we're broadcasting from tonight. So we're looking for some, for anyone who may have some extra time on their hands, but we'll set up something formally. Just want to kind of put it out there if anyone has any special skills that they would like to want to help participate in improving our new CAG office space. Doug Larson's been doing a great job. He's going to be talking about the space later on this evening after our two guest presenters. So like I said, a little bit premature, but just want to put it on folks' radar that we're going to be probably asking for some extra hands to help out. And like I said, don't know if we have much more of any announcements. Was there anything, Sarah, that you wanted to share, or from, or I saw Laura. I didn't know if Laura Feltman had anything that she wanted to share that for announcements or any upcoming event.
Well, I can just share, if people haven't seen it, we do have the gallery that features the history of the Lower Willamette that's in City Hall. And
Yes.
It's right there in the foyer. So if you haven't seen it yet, a lot of great history of the area, and it looks beautiful in that space. So we're moving it to Lloyd Center in November, December, and then mid-January, it's going to head to the Port of Portland. So hopefully you'll get to see it at one of those places. But I will say that the space in the historic City Hall is particularly a beautiful setting for that exhibit.
Yeah, and I want to give a shout out to all the incredible hard work that you have done and all of the hard work that the artists who have participated in the exhibit have done. We couldn't have done it without you folks. So super excited for all of the energy that has been placed into that. So with that, I think we're going to go ahead and jump into our first presentation. And I believe we're going to go ahead and go with Mike. Do we decide on the lineup? I'm so sorry. Who's going first? I think I put Mike in the announcements first, so.
Sounds right, and I'm ready.
Okay, let's go for it. All right.
So should I start sharing my screen, or you didn't have any more introduction?
No, I think that's pretty much it. Yeah, we can go ahead and start with the screen share if you're queued up there.
Okay. Okay, well, my name is Mike Kortenhof, and thank you for inviting me to be here. I'm a manager at the DEQ. Up until now, largely responsible for underground storage tank work. And I'm taking on a new role in addition to underground storage tanks with what you're going to hear about today. I'm here to talk about earthquake resilience in Portland Harbor. Very quick overview, and I mainly want to be able to talk with you each. I'll tell you a bit about the new law that's come out, where DEQ stands with implementing it. I plan to use 10 or 15 minutes for that. And then the rest of the time, 20 minutes or so, or 15, to take questions and answers that you might have. And if there's, I'm not seeing the chat, and I think it'd be best if I just buzz through these real quick and then we get the questions at that point. So I'm trying to make my page change and it's not. Here we tested it and everything. There we go. So the critical energy infrastructure hub, you might have heard us talking about. The location, the term CEI hub was coined to reflect the full scope of the operations there regarding our energy infrastructure and its complexity. Critical is meaningful on several levels. It is, in simpler terms, the oil terminals, particularly Portland Harbor related oil terminals, Linton and Wilbridge. Map you can see there. You can see some facts about all of them on the side of the screen. The area, as I think this group knows well, is highly vulnerable. It's poor soils, dredge spoils that are vulnerable to liquefaction, and huge operations. 14 different tank farms in Portland Harbor itself. There's a couple more I'll talk about in a minute that are involved with this too, but this is largely a Portland Harbor thing, and the fuel tanks at the Portland airport too. 350 million gallons of all kinds of oil can be stored in the Portland Harbor portion of it. It's critical also because 90% of Oregon's fuel supply passes through this hub. So if something happens to it, that's a significant economic problem in addition to the environmental risk that it poses. Here's a pie chart that shows just some of the major categories of fuel that are stored in the tanks. Petroleum of all sorts. I think there's 600 different kinds of chemicals there, but largely motor fuels, gasoline, diesel, and such, as you can see here. 70% of the oil comes in and out, or comes in via pipeline from the Seattle area. 30% comes in from tank ships, barged in. And I already mentioned there's a pipeline running out to the Portland airport that provides all of the jet fuel for fueling the airport through this hub. Also critical when we think about earthquake resilience. So next I want to talk about earthquakes, because when an earthquake hits, and we know it will, this is a big problem, obviously. I hope you've all heard about the Cascadia magnitude 8 or 9 earthquakes that continue to hit the Pacific Northwest. This is just a shot of the subduction zone situation that I'm not going to talk about. The last big quake was in the year 1700, 322 years ago. Geologists have mapped back. They count 41 such earthquakes occurring in the past 10,000 years. We know another one's coming. Could be tomorrow, could be after we're all past. Well, we just don't know. The damage expected, just immense. Up to 5 minutes of intense ground shaking. Widespread damage just from the shaking. On the coast, the tsunamis that I presume you've heard about, and the inundation. They talk about the tsunami inundation only coming up to Longview, so not a direct consideration for Portland Harbor, the way it is on the coast. Widespread infrastructure damage. In addition to the failed tanks and the oil spilled, the pipelines are going to fail. Oil won't get in. Rivers are not going to be navigable due to the bridges down and debris. Emergency responders won't have access to the area to even fight or deal with the problem like we might otherwise expect. This threat was only recognized in our planning system in the 1980s. First seismic building codes were introduced in 1993. The new requirements that I'm here to tell you about recognize this threat and that we need better protection. DEQ's calling this the Fuel Tank Seismic Stability Program. Here's a shot of some of the tanks, particularly in the Wilbridge area, and what we know about them, and we're still gathering information. You can see on the pie charts, we largely don't know a lot about most of them. We know that a few of them have reported to our spill contingency planning folks that they've done seismic retrofits, 1%. We know that a few of them were built after 93 when there was better building codes, 3%, but we know a lot of them are very old and not likely to withstand any degree of ground shaking. And it's not just the tanks, it's the whole infrastructure, also the name, you know, the wharves, the piping, the connections. This isn't just about tanks. There's been a lot of studies led by the city of Portland, Multnomah County, the city club on this risk that led to this law, and they paint a really bleak picture. 600 tanks there, they're estimating 400 tank failures. 1 million or 2 million gallons of fuel released in the earthquake. They're estimating 43% of it has the potential to flow straight to the river. Deaths and injured, you know, in the hundreds in the immediate area. Economic impact, $1, $2, $3 billion in impact. Plus even more after the quake when the earth, you know, when there's fuel shortages and the economy is hampered that way. That's why this work is needed. Here's the guts of the DEQ message and where we stand. The Oregon legislature passed Senate Bill 1567, this short session this year, passed in March, became effective in June. It requires 17 facilities specifically that have large capacity storage tanks, over 2 million gallons if they have that, to assess their seismic vulnerability, site assessments as it were, and to propose mitigation to improve their infrastructure. They have until June 2024 to conduct that work. DEQ's job right now is to write rules to flesh out this mandate. We're convening a rule advisory committee to provide the definitions and the process needed so the facilities know what a proper site assessment looks like and what a proper mitigation plan looks like. We have been working on that this summer. This is great timing. We're convening the first advisory committee on October 26th, about to be formally announced. So you all are early hearers of this. We anticipate having 2 more advisory committee meetings in December and February. If we can stay on schedule, we plan to have a proposed rule out for public notice next spring in April. Where there'll be a traditional 30-day public comment process, public hearings, take comments and the like. The advisory committee is 12 people, consists of the full spectrum of stakeholders, neighborhood advocates, environmental and environmental justice advocates, facility owners, local government, academics. We are committed to a robust public involvement process, not only through that, but meetings like this and ongoing outreach as we go through this whole process. You can follow the process by going to the webpage that's linked here and see updates there. And there's a listserv Gov delivery you can sign up that will be posting the materials from the meetings and more information about progress as we proceed. This page shows a variety of the resources that carry some of the information I've just been talking about. If you want more details, I'm not going to spend any more time on that. And with that, I am almost ready for questions. We don't have news to share about the specific rule requirements today. That's what our advisory process is for. We're getting concepts developed and getting recommendations from those involved. Until then, though, we're happy to take questions and factor it into our thinking, and all ideas we hear are helpful. With that, we can use the rest of the time to discuss and answer any questions you might have.
All right, well, great. Thank you. Thank you so much for that. That was very informative. We do have a couple of questions in the chat, and if folks want to either raise their hand, I can call on them, or if at the virtual hand, or if you want to wild card it, you can just speak up as well. But it looks like Laura has her hand up, but let me go to the chat real quick. Let me see who has some questions in there. And it looks like those are both from you, Laura. So I'll just let you go ahead and go for it. Fantastic.
Great. All right. Yeah, just they're sort of different questions, but what is in the unknown tanks, the mystery tanks? That seems like a big chunk of the pie there.
Yeah, we don't know what's in the tanks. That's why we listed them as unknown. I believe they are largely more motor fuel and petroleum products. We just don't track that kind of information until now, but that's going to be coming in when we do this work.
And whose tanks are they? Who do they belong to?
Well, there's 17 different facilities. I didn't elaborate on it. 13 of them are in Portland Harbor proper. And one of them is on the Port of Portland airport land. They're the property owners I think you're familiar with. If I stop talking, I might be able to pull up a list for you, but it's the big terminals: Chevron, Shell, Phillips 66, McCall, Zenith. The Kinder Morgan pipeline has tank facilities themselves. Most notably, there are the other two counties that were mentioned. There are two facilities up in Columbia County, Port Westward, the PGE generating facility, and also the Columbia Pacific Biorefinery. They have storage capacity over 2 million gallons, and so they are subject to this. And lastly, there's a terminal down in Eugene. Kinder Morgan has a big terminal that is also required to do this work. That's why the bill specifies those three counties.
It seems like unknown tanks probably aren't being utilized. Maybe they're the first ones that can go, be removed, be emptied and removed. Do you think?
We don't know what the tanks are being used for, and this is capacity is the number, and not actual contents. And the bill is written about capacity. And we are also mandating seismic integrity here, not anything more than that. There's a whole nother sets of conversations about fuel use and phase out and such. But our authority is about seismic integrity of the tank systems, and facilities will have choices about that.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
It looks like Margaret Butler, you got your hand up there. And there's also some links in the chat too that may be able to answer some questions that folks may have if Mike wasn't able to get to those. So check those links out there. Okay, Margaret?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask another question about the unknown tanks, because according to the Eco Northwest report, 72 of those tanks are at Zenith. They don't know, nobody knows what's in them or what the condition of those tanks is. And so I was wondering if there's any reporting requirement right now about what's in it, because everybody else down there had shared somehow with some agency, shared much more information about what was in the tanks. That was the big group of unknowns. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the question. And the information that I just shared came from reporting through our spill contingency planning work. So there are some requirements, but I can't tell you the scope and the degree. This new rule and the work I'm describing will require information to be submitted, but in June 2024.
Right. Thank you.
All right, okay, and it looks like Scott, we have your hand up there.
Hi, hi, Michael. Question is maybe a little bit engineering oriented, but my understanding with relationship to failure analysis that tanks, you have corrosion as an opportunity for structural to be an unknown within a tank. You have the nonlinearity of the earthquake, which creates all kinds of interesting dilemmas related to the analysis. Just that alone is probably plenty for some engineering firms. But when you start factoring in the unknown conditions and all of these, how are you putting together the requirements so that you get a really true picture, or as true as a simulation can deliver, of what needs to be done so that see an outcome that's really desirable?
Yeah, that's the work going forward. DEQ is in this because of our regulatory expertise. We're quick to point out that we're not seismic experts or tank engineers. We do have a robust budget for engineering support for this work to guide the rulemaking, and we're contracting for that to answer questions like that. But we can't say now what that looks like. But those are very real questions, and there's a lot of engineering expertise out there. But we're talking about magnitude 9 earthquakes here. We get that, and some of the early feedback I'm already hearing is that we're breaking trail regarding magnitude 9 safety.
Well, I can guarantee
standards were written for other things.
Yeah, I can guarantee that. And then when you start factoring in these other types of nonlinear factors, one suggestion might be that you incorporate the American Society of Mechanical Engineers, who do have substantial expertise in this and might want to take a stake in the game as a nonprofit that has, they're kind of an organization that is respected for their non-political, highly technical contributions to the public processes.
For sure. And we are already doing that and aware of it. And part of this work, especially since we're developing unprecedented provisions, is to survey the other states, find out what other provisions they have to use as models. That's where I'm hearing that we're going to be developing some new things. And like I said, we can't divine what that's going to look like without the support of experts in the local governments, experts in the engineering community, and experts worldwide that we all intend to tap into. So I hope the answer, or I know the answer to your question will come through these advisory committee discussions.
Okay, and then one final bit of input is there is an organization located in Palo Alto, California, that they used to be called, I don't know what their name is now, but I think they're called Failure Analysis Associates. Might be a substantial resource to look into. They're like, they investigate like the national scale type of challenges. So.
I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the name Yume Wang here, who was the person, the Oregonian that coined the term CEI hub and is, totally immersed in this work and this law. And we're continuing to work with her as we go forward too, with all such kinds of comments.
Thank you.
All right, thanks for that, Scott. And it looks like we have Sarah.
Yeah, my question is about the cars, the rail cars right now, because any of us who live here know that it appears that they're using the trains as storage. It did used to be that way, but now what we're seeing is long lines of tank cars parked for considerable amount of time. Then they, they're just, are they going to be considered part of the formula? And do you think that they're being used as mini tanks on wheels?
Interesting question, Sarah. And I don't believe they were considered in the numbers that I've been sharing. We were talking about permanent infrastructure with that. Close reading of the authority and the statute is going to have to be applied to decide what the scope the scope question you asked is, and I can't wager a guess about how that would play out one way or the other.
Okay, thank you.
I'm not watching the clock in my 30 minutes. I'm counting on you, Michael, or somebody. I'll answer questions until I stop if need be, if you let me.
Let's do one more question. Let's do one more question, and then we will go ahead and lead on to the next one. Do you think you can hang around, Mike, and maybe pick up some more questions afterwards? If you can, we fully understand.
Yeah, I'd be happy to if we have more time.
Oh, fantastic.
And,
All right.
and I'll also, take questions later. My contact information's here. Please contact us any which way.
Okay, so if folks have more questions for Mike, if you can put those either in the chat or stick around until later on after Pam's discussion, and we'll get to those. And Sarah, you're done with your question, it looks like. So we're gonna go ahead and move on to our next presenter. And Pam, there you are. Yeah, if you want to go ahead and steer this vessel.
Vessel, you got it. I happen to be a sailor, Michael, so
Oh, all right.
I'll take the tiller. Anyway, hi, everyone. I appreciate the opportunity to be here and thank you for the invitation. My name is Pam Neild. I use she, her pronouns, and I work for the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability on the climate team. I have been working on climate-related projects and programs for the last 15 years with the city, and joined our RFS team back in January. So I have about 8 slides to present to you just to talk a bit about the renewable fuel standard and the project update that we have, and then we'll take questions from there. So let me go ahead and share my screen. And are people seeing the Portland Renewable Fuel Standard Code Amendment? Hope so. Is that a yes?
No, it's not.
Once again, we practiced this, didn't we? Okay, let me try again.
Here we go.
How about that?
Yes.
Yeah, excellent. So basically the renewable fuel standard, which I'll refer to as the RFS, is city code, and it regulates the blending or mixing of fossil fuel with renewable fuels. It's been in effect since 2006 and applies to both diesel and gasoline sold in retail locations throughout the city. Today's RFS requires a 5% minimum blend of biodiesel and a 10% blend of ethanol. The amendment being proposed applies to diesel fuel sales only, and it does not ban the sale of diesel, nor does it affect diesel use. People will still be able to drive vehicles that use petroleum diesel in the city of Portland. What it does do is change the composition of the fuel over time, which I'll detail later in the presentation. So why update it now? Well, there's 3 primary reasons. The first is regulatory. City Council directed my bureau, the BPS, to update the code in 2020 because it had become out of date. Renewable diesel, which is a type of fuel that was not available in 2006 and does not meet the definitions in the current RFS, is one example. In addition, the state developed a low carbon fuels program after 2006 that includes something called a carbon intensity standard, which is also not currently accounted for in our RFS. The second reason is climate. We are living in a climate emergency and we're running out of time to make the changes required to prevent irreversible damage. Portland City Council passed a 3-year climate emergency work plan on August 24th of this year. It includes an analysis of the pathways needed to reach 2030 and 2050 carbon emission reduction targets. The work plan points to an urgent need to reduce emissions as quickly as possible and highlights that the burning of diesel fuel, just diesel, in vehicles and off-road equipment is Portland's fourth largest source of carbon emissions, or about 14% of total local emissions. The third reason is our community's health. In many American cities, highway construction segregated communities of color and concentrated pollution in neighborhoods close to infrastructure. Portland is no different. Low income and communities of color will continue to bear the brunt of the worst impacts of air pollution if we don't take action. Staff are using the code amendment process to make a small repair to past harms to Portland's most vulnerable communities and individuals. Diesel fuel is dirty and cleaner, efficient alternatives exist. Those fuels are regulated through the RFS. So when I talk about renewable fuels or biofuels, what are we talking about? Well, biofuels are any fuel that is derived from plant or animal matter rather than petroleum fuel-based sources. So biofuels and renewable fuels are used interchangeably, those words are. Specifically, renewable diesel is a renewable alternative to diesel fuel that is produced through various thermochemical processes. It's derived from plant or animal matter. It's similar to fossil diesel and meets the same ASTM standards. Because of its ease and performance, it's well liked by large fleets, including our own city fleet, which has been using a blend of R99, which is basically 100% renewable diesel, almost exclusively since 2015. Another example is TriMet, who runs all of their buses on R99. Biodiesel is a renewable, biodegradable fuel made from vegetable oils, animal fats, or recycled restaurant grease. While biodiesel can be made from the same feedstocks as renewable diesel, it's actually produced through a different chemical process called trans-esterification. The current RFS calls for a 5% biodiesel blend. Ethanol, is also known as ethyl alcohol or grain alcohol, and it's made from corn, sugarcane, or from feedstocks made of cellulose. The current RFS is 10% ethanol blended with gasoline, and we're not proposing any changes to the ethanol standard at this time. So what are we proposing? Basically, it's a fuel neutral approach, which I'll highlight in the next slide. We are talking about increasing the percent of renewable fuels from 5% to 99% over 2023, eventually in 2026, having a 99% renewable fuel blend. The second major proposal is adding a carbon intensity standard. So carbon intensity is essentially a numeric value that allows us to compare different types of fuels, and it's very inclusive. It includes the entire life cycle of that particular fuel. In our proposal, we are suggesting a carbon intensity of 40 or less, which guarantees lower carbon emissions from the fuels that get blended. And the third changes are new definitions and covered fuels. So I provided an example of that earlier, where renewable diesel didn't exist in 2006. So we're looking at adding that as a new definition to meet the code. And I also wanted to mention that the existing code has exemptions for fuels that are used in the marine, railroad, and air travel environment. And so that those exemptions would remain in the new code. We're also adding an exemption for emergency equipment, as there have been some perceived issues with biodiesel and backup generators. It's a really, really small percent of diesel fuel that's used, but there will be an exemption for that emergency equipment. So I said I'd go into the new standard and what that looks like. So if you look on the far left of the graph here, you'll see the current RFS, and that's at 5% biodiesel blend. And what we're looking to do is phase in. The schedule will begin next year with a 15% renewable fuel, and then increase over the period of time up to 2026, where there would be a 99% renewable requirement. So the proposed phase-in schedule accounts for fuel industry forecasts and when supply of renewable diesel will be available. The next thing I wanted to point out or bring your attention to is the 2020 numbers and 2023. So the outline portion of the graph is here. Oregon is currently using an 11% renewable fuel blend. And so even though the RFS only requires 5%, we're actually seeing approximately 11% being blended into our diesel fuel today. So the jump to 15% next year isn't a huge leap, it's just a 4% increase. I wanted to talk a little bit about how we're going to manage supply and price in this. So we know that forecasting, neither the city or any of our stakeholders have kind of a crystal ball on what fuel prices will be, which is why we're proposing an advisory group to monitor the transition so we can adjust the schedule if real world conditions change. Regardless of the exact timing, we know that in the next few years, there will be plenty of renewable diesel available on the market to meet our needs. So this is a similar situation to what we were in when the original RFS was adopted in 2006. And back then, it was the supply of biodiesel and ethanol that were kind of aspirational. But we went ahead and passed the standard anyway, and it worked. So I wanted to just share the kind of the policy process that we've been through. We started our research back in 2020 and 2021 and monitoring state legislative efforts, as well as conducting a producer supplier workshop. In January of this year through August of this year, we had more formal stakeholder education and engagement. We just completed our public comment period that ended on October 3rd of this year. And so staff, myself and my two other coworkers are working on code revisions, and we are planning to bring an updated policy to City Council later on this fall, hopefully November. And what I thought I would do is put the project website as well as the mailing list. I will pop that in the chat for you all. And you'll be able to, if you sign up for the mailing list, you'll be sure to get any updates that come out about the code. Lastly, I have kind of a boilerplate slide here, but wanted to give a shout out to the person who's here on our contact list, which is Andrea Jacob. She is here on the call this evening and is my fabulous manager. So that is the end of the slideshow, but we are both here to answer questions for you all.
Okay, thanks, Pam. Thanks so much for that. It looks as though we may have a couple of questions in the chat. If anyone else has any questions, please raise your hand and we'll call on you. It looks like I have one from Laura. Says, just curious, what is the range or scale for their carbon intensity standard?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I actually have another slide on that, which I will.
Hey, Pam, I put the answer in the chat from the
Oh, you
background.
did?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
so
Okay.
our chart runs from 0 to 120, and the petroleum diesel has a CI carbon intensity of 100. The average, so this is data that DEQ tracks. They, through the Oregon Clean Fuels Program, report on the carbon intensity of all the fuels. So our average is around 33. So Pam mentioned the CI of 40 that we're proposing. It's trying to strike a balance between being of a low enough carbon intensity to make a dent in carbon emissions, but not so stringent that we won't have enough supply, which would really bring up the cost and make the policy not doable. So we did take public comment on whether or not that's the right carbon intensity, and we're still mulling through that feedback. But the proposal was to start it at 40.
I also didn't mention, but thought it might be useful and interesting for you all to know that we We use an average of approximately 120 million gallons of diesel fuel, or I should say we sell 120 million gallons of diesel fuel in the city of Portland every year. So I believe Mike talked about the number of gallons of fuel that we're storing on all of the tanks out there. The city of Portland uses just 120 million of those.
All right, well, great. It looks like Doug Larson has his hand raised. Doug.
Sure. I've got a couple of questions. The basic simple question, we've all read about ethanol being produced in corn growing regions and blended into gasoline, particularly in winter. But I've never read anything about where the renewable and the biodiesel come from. Where do they make them? Are they local? Do they import them? Are they national?
Yeah, that's a great question. So there, like the overarching word that gets used is called a feedstock for renewable fuels. So the corn and the soy that you mentioned for ethanol, that's a feedstock. The feedstocks for biodiesel and renewable diesel can be the same, and they can be lots of things. So palm oil is one. It's actually excluded in our proposal because the carbon intensity standard of that feedstock is too high. So the feedstocks for like the 40 CI value that we're proposing would be coming from low carbon feedstocks like used cooking oil, fats, oils, greases. It can be fish oil. There are a number of feedstocks that are used, but they tend to be sort of spent products rather than food products like corn or soy.
So if Portland uses 120 million gallons of diesel a year, is there that much used French fry oil out there to scale up to the whole country?
Well, I can't speak for the whole country, but I can speak for the city of Portland and say that the suppliers and producers that we conducted our workshop with resoundingly said yes. There's plenty of feedstock at that CI value.
That's amazing.
It's
So,
not all French fry oil, though, I guess I would say. There's
okay,
you can
that'd
make
be a big
turns out you can make
explanation
fuel.
why we're all getting fatter.
Yeah, you can make fuel out of a lot of different things. So, but yeah, the recycled stuff definitely has the lowest CI. That's for sure.
Okay. My other question, where does Oregon stand now in relation to California and Washington on diesel emission standards? I've read a little bit that the legislature has taken tentative steps toward parity. Are we going in that direction still?
Can you clarify what you mean by diesel emission standards?
California and the state of Washington both have passed laws that, for example, they require lower emissions from all the vehicles sold in those states now, where, you know, the story is that the vehicles that no longer meet requirements in those states are being sold in Oregon, where they continue to over pollute. So
Maybe that's a question for our DEQ colleagues on the phone. I'm not sure. I mean, I know that we would like Oregon to be in line with Washington and California, but it's kind of a little outside the scope of what we're working on with this policy.
okay, like presumably your policy lowers emissions, right?
Yes. Yes, but if you're talking about emission standards on cars or emission standards for like there's a lot of different policy mechanisms that address emissions, and carbon emissions is what we focus on. I think you're talking about diesel emissions at the state level. So I don't know
Right.
the answer.
The diesel emissions are the ones we worry about because we breathe them in and they cause all kinds of health issues. So the faster we get rid of them, the happier we can be.
Right.
So my question is just, does your program address in part that danger?
Yes.
Yes, so both biodiesel and renewable diesel get at, I think what you're talking about, which is primarily PM 2.5 particulate
Right.
matter, which is like that heavy, tiny little from the combustion of the fuels that we're breathing in. So both of those fuels actually combust more cleanly and have a lower particulate matter. So obviously it depends on the blend, right? Like if you're blending in more biodiesel or less biodiesel, more renewable, less renewable, but it can be anywhere from 60 to 80% lower particulate matter than petroleum diesel, depending on how you blend it and at what
So-
percentage. But it's
so
a
without
much cleaner
changing
burning,
engine-
less dirty fuel.
Right, without changing engine standards, then you can lower the emissions considerably.
Absolutely. And the, just sharing an internal example, the mechanics that work on our trucks for the city of Portland are reporting actually lower maintenance needs for the trucks because they're having to change the filters so much less. And they're also much happier because they work on those engines in an indoor environment. And it's just, they're so much cleaner that they talk about improved air quality inside of their work environment, which is exactly a benefit. Yeah, like you were
Sounds
saying.
like a win-win. Thank you.
Mhm.
All right, thanks for that, Doug. That was a good question. And it looks like Sarah, you have your hand up there.
Appreciate everybody coming in. I'm trying to see how this all fits together, all the pieces. So first question is, how will the biodiesel get here? Because one of our concerns, of course, is the trains that are parked everywhere. So how's it going to get here?
So we're not predicting that it will get here any differently than it does today. If you recall on the slide that I was showing, we're already at 11% renewable fuels sold in the state. And Portland is looking to up it to 15% just for the city of Portland. And that is all currently biodiesel. I mean, the vast majority is biodiesel. Mainly because the supply of renewable diesel isn't as available today as we're projecting that it will be by 2024, 2025, and 2026.
And the next question, which kind of combines different initiatives, is the fuel tank bill, which was supposed to reduce new fuel tanks, doesn't include biodiesel. So if a company wants to build a new tank for biodiesel, are they allowed to?
Yeah, the renewable fuels were exempted from the fossil fuel terminal zoning amendment. I think that's what you're referring to. So there is a limited ability, I think, for expansion of renewables, but I want to double check on that. They definitely, well, that's also being appealed. So I don't think that, or will be appealed. So this has been in a litigation mode for the last several years. So whether or not the fossil fuel terminal zoning amendment will actually ever be implemented is still kind of up in the air. But my understanding, and I'm trying to remember, is that we did put in a provision for exempting renewable fuel from the fossil fuel terminal zoning amendment, the fossil fuel infrastructure limitation.
And I think something to keep in mind as well as state law currently allows retailers to sell a biodiesel blend up to 20%. And because biodiesel is made locally, it's made in it's made, I should say, on the West Coast. When I say local, it's actually been a equal or lower cost for those retailers for a few years now. So Many of them are actually blending up to 20% biodiesel into their diesel today. And you're selling it, you don't even know that you're buying a 20% biodiesel product, because the stickers at the retail stations currently say up to 20%, because the state allows them to do that blending.
Well, the other concern that I have is the exports. You know, based on the CI hub and the earthquake, I think, you know, we all understand that we haven't thought of a way to not use, you know, fuels, but on the CI hub, but we don't want to export fuels. Like I live in Linton and I don't want to take a risk for the
I
export.
lost Sarah. Am I the only one?
Oh,
No, I can hear her.
okay. So I guess what I'm saying is there's a difference between asking people to risk their river and all the things that could happen if there was an earthquake for our local use than it is to ask people to make that sacrifice for multinational corporations who want to export through our harbor. So anybody, Andrea, Pam, Mike, anybody have any thoughts on the difference between exporting from that CI hub and just having our own local use?
I guess all I would say is, I mean, that the export situation is the current state. So we're the authority that we have is in the motor vehicle fuel code. And so we're just trying to substitute a dirty fuel for a cleaner fuel. And I think that's kind of where the authority of that code ends and what our mission is. So it's a different policy question and one that I don't feel like we're the right one to ask. It's a values question. And we're just trying to get rid of carbon and get rid of air pollution in the immediate term. And that's what, you know, this is not a perfect policy. It doesn't solve all problems, that we would be the first to acknowledge that. But it does have some real significant immediate upsides. And it's not making a problem worse. It's just taking the status quo and making it a little bit less bad. Is how I view it. A lot less bad, actually, when you look at the air pollution benefits and the carbon emission reductions.
Thank you. Thank you.
I have the same sort of answer to that too. I recognize the question and it's a good one. And I also suspect that it's outside the authority of this seismic improvement mandate. I did not mention that part of Senate Bill 1567 also directs the Oregon Department of Energy to do a fuel, blanking on the exact phrase in the bill, but a fuel availability study in the event of an earthquake. So the Department of Energy clearly has input on the kinds of questions you're talking about, but even there, I think the bill calls for seismic related work.
Okay, well, thank you for that question there. And it looks like we have Laura, your hand is raised there.
Hi, yeah. So renewable diesel comes from McCall or Carson, and their supply comes from Neste, which comes from Singapore across the ocean. Very carbon heavy, you know. And I guess also in trying to understand renewable diesel, there are challenges. I've been trying to read about it. Feedstock procurement, wastewater treatment, waste treatment, finding the right place to produce renewable diesel, converting facilities. There are just a lot of challenges. And I don't know, maybe this isn't what we're talking about tonight per se, but it seems like we should be pursuing, well, having a mass transit system for one, a real mass transit system. And you know, pursuing electric vehicles for now. And I know the state is to a degree, but renewable diesel and biodiesel, it's going to take a long time to switch over. And nothing that you've said tonight really makes me feel comfortable with the challenges ahead with these fuels. Any comments?
Yeah, no, I think what you've identified as fears and concerns are real and valid, and I share them with you. And something that I didn't mention that I should have in my introduction is the climate emergency work plan and our climate emergency declaration that kind of we're operating under right now identifies electrification and identifies mass transit as other goals of the city. So while this little policy has its own ability to make a tiny step in the right direction, electrification, the things that you mentioned are part of our broader work plan. And I will put a link to that work plan in the chat so you can see it. I mean, the updating the RFS code is one of, how many is it, Andrea? 35 or so actions that we have slated around our climate emergency just over the next 3 years.
Okay, and can I just put one pitch in for closing down the Portland International Raceway? 4 months out of the year, dumping tons of carbon into the air, frontline, vulnerable communities, and some of it's leaded fuel for some of the races. 4 months out of the year, and that's not counting the noise pollution. So that kind of seems like low-hanging fruit to me. And I think, you know, Portland could be smarter about, you know, reducing its carbon load if it really looked around locally. Thank you.
Hello, Doug. Your voice is not coming through clearly. You've got a lot of digital noise.
You sound like you're underwater, Doug.
Okay, we'll have to mute Doug for the moment. Sorry about that, Doug. We'll catch you next time. If you can put your it sounds like you're on your phone, but if there's any way you can put your question in the chat, that would be fantastic. And with that, is there any other questions we have for Pam and Andrea? And let's see here. And at this moment too, if there are any other questions that we have for Mike, I did see looks like there was an inquiry in here. Bonnie said that she.
Yeah, I saw that question about why not faster, 2 years to submit assessments. Is that what you were looking at?
Yeah, I realize that the involved industries need to do in-depth assessments, but why is the deadline of these reports scheduled so far out in the future based on the unpredictability of the timing for seismic activity?
Yeah, we have good question. I can tell you that DEQ is responsible for the first year of that. That's how long it takes us to do super fast rulemaking. And that's normally simple rulemaking. So we did, when asked, say we need at least a year just to get the rules on the books. And then the thinking was then the facilities need a year to operate and finish their plans with the rules in hand. We are encouraging and hopeful that they're already working on assessments now so as to meet that deadline. But that was considered the fastest possible schedule, befitting the urgency of the problem.
Okay, thank you for that. Thank you. I do have a little bit probably of a comment for Pam and Andrea. I was just, well, the majority of the folks in the Zoom here, a lot of folks here, we live in North Portland, and we live next to the St. John's Bridge. I really like the image that you had up there at the beginning of your slide. So we experience a lot of diesel particulate matter here in St. John's. I think it's probably one of the kind of heaviest diesel emission spots in the country, or definitely in the States. It's pretty intense here. I work in the area, and St. John's and St. Louis, or Lombard and St. Louis, that intersection there, man, that place is intense. I don't know if you've ever stood there for about 5 minutes waiting for the light to change. It's pretty intense. So with that, I don't know if and there's also lots of apartments. There's lots of children in those apartments in that area, and there's major heavy traffic that's right there. So I guess I just wonder if understand that this new fuel may reduce the size of particulate, which can definitely cause less pollution. But I'm also wondering too if there's any way that really, and maybe this is a DEQ thing, more of a state thing, but we need better vehicles. We need better vehicles in our state. We know, as Doug had mentioned earlier, that Washington and California have better diesel standards, and a lot of those diesels were sold in Oregon, and they're being used here. So I commend, thank you so much for doing the hard work. I know this is really, and we don't want to kill the good to spite the evil or whatever. We definitely want to put a good foot forward and do the best for the health of Portlanders. But this is something we've been dealing with and been talking about for a long time, even with the whole when the state got the funding, they got money from the lawsuit from Volkswagen, and we had money that was supposed to go towards, or at least that's what our representative Tina Kotek at the time had said, that money was going to go towards repairing outdated diesel trucks to improve the air quality in North Portland. I don't think any of that happened at all. But I just want to kind of bring that to the surface, that it is an issue. We do appreciate the work that you folks are doing, that the city is doing. It does make a difference, but we definitely need more. We need, it's very incremental, and incrementalism has its place, but we really need radical change right now. We're what is it, our 9th day in October with 80 degrees. So we need our leaders to kind of step up to the plate. But yeah, that was just my comment. I just wanted to kind of put it out there, and if there's anyone else that has anything they would like to share, or would like to have any questions or clarifications from our speakers tonight, this is your moment to go ahead and make that known. Otherwise, it looks like we have a hand up. How about we'll go for it, Scott, and then we'll skip on over to Doug after your question there.
Okay, thanks, Michael. So, in hearing what you just said, and then hearing what Laura Feldman said and what Sarah said, and even the speakers, who it seems as though the people that are taking action in government, they have a very specific mission. But in order to get the kind of action that you're talking about, Michael, we need a bigger picture for, those specific missions are incremental. They're making progress. I mean, I'm actually quite impressed with the progress that they're gonna, that standard for the diesel and the R99 fuel. All those things are things that I've been thinking about for a long time, and to see it acting in government is exciting for me. But at the same time, what you said is undiminishable. It is, things are going way too slow. And so my question in general to anyone is, who is the authority? Who can we go to raise our voice to them so that bigger picture action happens?
I mean, I guess I'll take a stab at it because I'm the climate program manager, so I'm supposed to have an answer to this. I think it's critical to work on all the levels. Like the local government can definitely not do this alone. We need state government, we need the federal government, we need all levels of government, we need all the people, we need academia, and we need business and industry to get on board. They're the ones producing the carbon, right? But we can't just mandate our way out of this completely, right? It has to be collaborative. We have to bring all the people together and hear everybody's perspective. So that does take time. I am glad that you like the diesel policy. I think it actually makes a really big difference. It is a small policy, but it is, as Pam mentioned, is nested in a larger strategy. We have net zero goals. Portland has some of the most advanced climate goals that you can have as far as cities doing this work. We have them. But what you're noticing is that we do have a pretty specific set of tools at our disposal. And we can't regulate lots of things around utilities, for example. We can't regulate things around building codes. Those are just out of our jurisdiction. So what we did with our climate emergency work plan is, we set the big vision and the big goal, and then focus really specifically on the places that the city has the agency and the authority to act right now. Not to wait for the federal government, not to wait for the state, but to do certain things right now. And that's what we told them when we went in this past summer with the climate emergency work plan. These things that we're going to do in this work plan over the next 3 years, they're not going to solve climate change, but they are going to put us on a path to potentially solving climate change. And we're also sending signals to the state government, to the federal government. Cities are the laboratories for these things. So if we do it in Portland, other cities will do it, regions will catch on. So that's our theory of change. It's not to be confused with the city of Portland can solve this problem by itself. It certainly can, and we can only affect our pieces of it, but that we're trying to do that.
Well, I like the lead by example philosophy. That's a very, very powerful thing. And, even though you said it's a small policy, I do agree that it has a big impact. Even if we eliminate most fuels, there's still going to be a role for that particular solution in a future where, you've got a problem with infrastructure, some other type of infrastructure, generators. If you can, generating power that's on demand is still going to have a big need. So anyway, I like your thought process, and I guess we'll have to digest that a little bit and see how us as locals can get our voice heard in different things.
Yeah, thank you for that that answer, Andrea. Thank you very much. It looks like Laura has her hand up there. Okay, all right, Laura, here you go.
I was just gonna say that was a great answer. And just from the only thing I'll add, I'm kind of just brainstorming a bit too from EPA's side of things, is under this administration, there is a huge and really great focus on environmental justice. And I did send out in the Portland Harbor listserv announcement today, there's in November, it's anticipated to launch a couple grant programs that kind of get at some of what we're talking about. One of them is called, it's an environmental justice collaborative problem solving cooperative agreement. And so it's intended, for groups, who have ideas on kind of some of these problems that are holistic. If you have an idea, there are some funding opportunities now. I'll put the links to those websites in the chat. They're not updated yet because the grants actually those funding opportunities haven't been released. But there is just a lot more funding at the federal level going to support some of those, ideas, because they're very much related to environmental justice. So.
Okay.
Cool. Thanks for that, Laura. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
And it looks like Doug did contribute a question here. He says, how does diesel exhaust emissions contribute to pollution in the rivers?
So I don't have a direct link or scientific study that I can share, but I think the way to think about particulate matter and what this policy will do to help reduce that is to think about something that we call black carbon. So that's essentially the byproduct of, burning dirty fossil fuels. I think the easiest way to picture it is literally like the black soot landing on our snowpack and our mountains, and that contributing to actually faster warming. And obviously the snowpack is, at some point, rivers as well, right? And so there's just a connection with all of it. So like I said, I don't have like a scientific report that I can share, but I think, Doug, it's a good question. And there is a positive contribution. The sooner we can get, to electrification and a clean grid, but then in the case of this policy, the sooner we can get to more renewable fuels as opposed to petroleum diesel, the cleaner combustion that we have.
All right. Well, thank you so much. Thank you. And from this point here, we're going to jump over to Doug Larson, and Doug's going to share with us what he's been up to with the Portland Harbor Community Advisory Group's new office.
So one moment while I.
Yeah, sure. Take your time. And I want to once again just thank Pam and Mike and Andrea. Thank you too. And I believe you had someone else here too, Mike, that was joining with you as well.
Correct, Svetlana Lazarev. Who is
Okay,
helping
yeah,
coordinate.
Scott too. Yeah, thank you so much for being here tonight, and great presentation. I think we've all have learned a lot, and we'll probably have more questions as well, from it as well. But we're really excited that that to see that our local government is actually doing things, doing things to make the lives of Oregonians better. So we're super grateful for that. And we're excited to see more of that to come in the future as well. Doug, are you ready for that there?
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thanks so much.
Yeah, I've got it on my screen. I'm sorry, everyone, but I'm a novice at this.
Oh, that's okay.
So getting from my screen to sharing, and apparently there's a
green button that says share screen. And then when you
Right.
click that, Doug, you'll see a selection of little tiny boxes, and pick the one that has the data in it that you want to share.
Yeah.
And Michael, don't forget Jessica wants to share about the grants.
Oh, yes. Well, while you guys are, do you guys want, should I give you a few moments, or could we skip over to Jessica here real quick?
Yeah, skip to Jessica for a bit.
Hey, Jessica, I see that you're here. If you want to jump on and unmute yourself. Fantastic. Awesome.
Hi, thank you so
there.
much,
Sure.
Sarah and Michael. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk with you all briefly, just to share that, well, first of all, for folks that I may not know in this space, my name is Jessica Terlikowski, and I'm with the City of Portland's Portland Harbor program, and coordinate the community involvement program for that. And one of the pieces of our community involvement program is a grants program. And we're really excited that today we launched the new funding opportunity for the next calendar year. So we have $500,000 available for grants to support community-led efforts starting in 2023. The applications are due November 16th. And I'll put information in the chat for folks to be able to access that information. And there's really two opportunities for community to engage in this effort. So one is sort of obvious, right? Sort of applying for the funding opportunity itself. But the other thing is that we really want community members to be a part of the selection process. And so we have an application, really, really short. I shouldn't even call it an application form. It's more of like an interest, or applications for like an interest form. For individuals to answer a few simple questions, to share their interest about sitting on a grant review panel, and expressing ability, excuse me, well, something like her ability to spend the necessary time to review applications, to talk with other panelists, and to make the decisions about who's being funded for the next year. You don't have to have previous grant review experience. We'll provide you with the information and support and guidance to help you with that, if that's something that you're interested in. And then also we have community members are eligible to receive a $500 honorarium for their time. And we recognize that it's a small amount of money given the level of effort that is required. But with the current policies that the city has in place, we're kind of limited in terms of what we're able to provide. So it's really sort of, intended to be sort of a sort of acknowledgement and of the contribution, excuse me, and time and expertise that people are bringing in. The grants that are being funding amount that is available, community groups can request up to $75,000 for their work. So we're talking some real good money here, like real money to do the work that is so often undervalued. And we know community members are really doing this work on shoestring budgets all the time and putting just so much time and effort into this work. And so we're really excited to be able to make more resources available to support it. I'll put the information in the chat and invite folks to reach out to me directly. I'll put my contact information in there as well. We're actually going to be holding 2 info sessions in the next couple of weeks, one on October 20th in the afternoon, and then one on October 25th in the evening. All of that information is on our website as well. And the last thing, because I don't want to take more time away from Doug, but just to say too, if folks have any challenges with or questions about the application, or want to talk through sort of what their process or what their thinking is and what their vision is for their work, we're here to do that with you all too, and to lend support in however and whatever ways that we can to help folks be successful. So thank you again for the opportunity to talk with you all and to share this. We're really excited, I think, to see, as our grant program has been evolving over the years, we learn more and more each time and are integrating community feedback as we're receiving it. So I think it's exciting to sort of see it continue to have this iterative process and really working to reflect back what we're hearing back from community. So as folks have comments and are seeing things that are working well, not working, suggestions for improvement, please share those with us. It makes our work better and enables us to better serve you all. So really appreciate that.
Wow, thank you, Jessica. Thank you so much. That was great. Thank you.
So
Okay.
I'm gonna have to do a verbal picture.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Presentation. Apparently my computer security is beyond my
Oh no. Okay.
skills in the moment. So the Portland Harbor CAG's been in existence since about 2001, so almost 22 years. And in that time, we've never had an office. So this year, the people at Green Anchors down alongside the Portland boat launch in Cathedral Park offered us a free office. But of course, nothing's free. What we have is a government surplus 12 by 60 foot trailer that you can see Michael and Laura are sitting in the room. But we've got to upgrade it to office standards. You can see we're putting in new plank flooring to make it a bit more pleasant environment. So we'll divide the space up into an office and a storage room, and then a big conference room where you see Michael and Laura sitting. Excuse me, Laura. So to this date, we started out with a door that was 4 feet above the ground to enter the space. So we've built a deck and stairs to get up into the building. It comes equipped with mini splits, so we've got air conditioning and heat. There we are. We've found a donor who's going to give us track lighting to install. So the artwork and the show that Sarah referenced earlier that's on display down at the city, in between gallery showings, we'll be able to hang it, we'll be able to turn our conference room into gallery space, and it can be hanging on the walls for storage in the interim. So it should be a pretty brightly animated interior by the time we're done. So as Michael pointed out, you can see the plain white wall in back of him. We're looking for painters probably next week sometime to go through and paint the walls. We've got more walls to build and the doors have to be reconfigured, and we've permission to put windows in. We've got one window right next to Michael, but it can be fairly dim in the daytime. So lots of work to do. We're excited to be there. For those of you who are not familiar with green anchors, it's interesting space. It's probably 20 some acres with 80 small tenants, and they're all kinds of artists and small business people who rent space there. They offered us free office because one, we needed one, and two, they want to attract more environmental attention to the operation that they have going on. They have a beautiful cove on the riverbank, and as part of the ongoing Superfund cleanup, the cove and the pilings and the beach will all be cleaned and removed, and it'll be a useful public space. Long-term, Frog Ferry, when that gets itself off the ground, will base itself down in green anchors, because rather than the city park, they'll be able to support small coffee shops and different amenities for people waiting to get on the ferry. So we'll be right in the center of all of that. So thank you, Michael and Laura, for exhibiting the space that I couldn't. But we're all excited about the ongoing project. Thanks, Michael.
Yeah, sure.
And I just want to say to everybody that this is all of your space. This is everybody who's working on the river. It's not meant just for us. We're going to have the front areas going to be open so people can come in and learn about different issues, the Superfund, but other issues too. We'll do education. Then we will have the conference room and office space. So it's not just for us. And Green Anchors, if you've ever been there, it has a great community space. You have to sign up for that outdoor space, but that's where we had our last kind of summer art activity. So, and there is a big bee apiary and greenhouses of native plants. So what we're hoping is that there'll be a sign that says River Resource Center, or maybe that won't be the name of it, but we'll think of a sign, and that people who are coming to Green Acres will be able to go in. It won't be locked, and they can come in and learn about the Superfund and about all the efforts that everybody's making. And so we're hoping that it will be a place where if somebody says, oh, I'd like to know more, that, we can send them there. But we're also hoping people will have conferences and meetings there. And we're just hoping that it will really, really be a great source of education as well as community. And I don't know about other Laura's sitting there right now, but when I'm there, it gives me hope. So I hope that, you know, people who come down here, I mean, it's definitely funky. I'm not going to say it's not, it's so creative. There's so much creativity. So I hope that we will all feel like that's kind of our river home, you know. So anyway, thanks to Green Anchors for, you know, they could have rented the space, and letting us all use it is really a gift. So
It's really nice. There's a large disco ball floating out in the property. And the floor looks amazing. I heard that Doug recently did the floor and it looks really nice. So good job.
Yeah, super grateful. Super grateful. Well, everyone, thank you so much for us having another successful CAG meeting tonight. If there's anyone that has any additional announcements they would like to share before we call it an evening, here's your moment. So if there's anything that folks would want to share, here's the time to do that. Otherwise, thank you so much, and we will be seeing folks again next month. We'll be working on that schedule, and thanks for everyone for taking out the time on your busy nights to join us. We're really super grateful that everyone could be here, and very excited about the turnout, and super excited to see Laura here too. Yeah, so thanks everyone for being here again. Can't thank you enough. This is a great meeting, and super grateful for our guests that we had, and thank you, Jessica, for the pitch for the grant. Thank you so much, and we will all be seeing you again soon. Okay, thanks. Have a great one.
And Michael, thanks.
thank you.
All right, thanks. Good to see you, Arthur. Thanks, Scott. Thank you. Anna, thank you. Thank you so much.